crypto.com, tag RightsCon, and this is the Cottage. So any questions you may have during the panel, go there and we...
So hi everybody, thank you so much for being here with us, and you are welcome to come closer. So we are cozy and connected, and that's the idea here. It's really connected. The next 1.5 billion people global connect initiative is an initiative that started with some heroes inside the US government and has spread so far all over the world, and is also has become an interagency effort. Civil society from around the world has been supporting this since September last year when it was launched. And I think that even with a lot of our differences in other subject areas, we do have in common that we want to connect people, and we want to connect that people well. And we want to ensure that when countries invest in other type of infrastructure, it actually invests in an efficient way and bring connectivity. So if you are digging a hole to install electricity cables, why not put the cables for internet and fiber optics, etc. So I think one of the core ideas here with the Global Connects really to change the narrative.
Not be focused on this. And then also particular companies and individuals within companies like Mark Zuckerberg and on internet.org and Free Basics. And I think there is a common ultimate agenda, which I think is absolutely a development imperative. But at the same time, there are different strategies in place. And the key kind of message that I wanted to convey in this panel, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole time, is that connectivity is not enough. That connectivity must happen and must take place within a rights framework, because what you ultimately can end up with is people getting access to part of the internet, or people getting connected to an internet that is censored, monitored, surveilled, throttled, and even militarized. And that is the last thing that we want or need. So that would be my just opening salvo. I don't know if I mentioned the organization that I'm from, accessnow.org, which is the convener of this conference, and our mission is to defend and extend the digital rights of users at risk. So we particularly look at connectivity from the perspective of the user and the human rights that they can exercise and enjoy within that connectivity.
Thank you, Brett, so much, and thank you for your presence. I know you are extremely busy with all the parallel sessions going on. But I think first, to set the ground, I would like to hear from Manu to actually explain a little bit what is the initiative, where it is, and how far it has gone, and what are its core goals and objectives. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolina. And thanks to Brett and Access Now for inviting us all here today. The Global Connect initiative is looking to help bring an additional 1.5 billion people online by 2020. This is actually an internationally agreed upon goal. It was agreed upon at the ITU Plenipotentiary meeting in Korea, their Connect 2020 resolution. And as part of this initiative, we're actually trying to give effect to this aspiration. We also trying to really look to see how the internet, and showcase how the internet is a way of achieving all the sustainable development goals that were recently adopted. And I think what I wanted to do in the very beginning is just to set the stage, the challenge that we have before us. The majority of internet usage is still in developed countries, something that we all know. And this is a stark kind of representation of the world today and internet connectivity. And you can see that Africa is lagging far behind. And this is no surprise to anybody in this room. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see the graph over time in terms of, despite growth, how the digital divide is persisting. And so the top graphic there is of developed countries, and you can see and imagine that this adoption rate would probably plateau around 80, 85. The developing countries are still lagging far behind. But again, as you look over time, the digital divide is not closing. That is to say that this gap is persisting, and this is all based on ITU data. And then just think about the least developed countries, the Afghanistans, the other countries that are in a lot of pain, where they are even below this adoption rate. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see as part of the Global Connect initiative, we're really trying to also explain why we think some countries are lagging. Like, what is the reason that they're falling behind? One, of course, that a lot of countries would flag is the lack of funds for infrastructure. The second one is, we would say, minimal technical expertise, corruption, political instability. We're also saying restraints on free speech. So we're trying to identify these problem areas as ways that, countries, when they think about creating an enabling environment for growth, they should really focus on these specific buckets. The other thing that we're trying to show is, where are we seeing progress? What are really kind of the countries that have kind of showcased a lot of growth in a fairly short amount of time? And of course, these are not any surprise to people in this audience. It's like Colombia, Costa Rica, Malaysia, Turkey, Peru. And then even in the least developed countries, you're seeing quite a lot of progress. And we think that there are a lot of themes that emerge here in terms of their investment policies, their competition policies. And there are a lot of reasons and things that can be learned from other countries that are also trying to kind of adopt the right approaches and the right policies. The key objectives, so one of the things that we're about to do is we're having, in just a few weeks' time, a major gathering with finance ministers and the World Bank on the sides of the spring IMF Bank Fund meeting. And our goal there is to really get the multilateral development banks, the finance ministers, to realize that the internet is just as important for connectivity and should be part of their development strategies. And as part of the Global Connect agenda, we have specific objectives that we've identified for financial institutions. We're telling the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, all of the banks that they should be prioritizing internet connectivity across their regional and functional practices, that they should be, right now, for example, the World Bank's transport ICT unit only does 1% of lending in ICT. 1% in today's, whatever year it is, 2016, we think that that is lagging far behind the demand from countries that they should see, and it neglects the fact that ICTs are such a cross-cutting enabler for growth across all sectors of our economy. We're also trying to, tell both the multilateral development banks and also development organizations that they should be thinking about dig once policies that are kind of integrating connectivity into hard infrastructure projects. So when you're kind of laying a road, you can also lay out a fiber and really kind of think about ways to expand connectivity in traditional infrastructure projects. The timeline for this initiative it was announced by Secretary Kerry in his speech in Korea in the spring. We launched the initiative formally when the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in September, partly to, again, highlight how the internet is a key driver of the SDGs and reflecting upon the fact that the SDGs specifically identified connectivity as such an important enabler for progress. And then we have had a number of high-level events, and our next one is going to be on April 13th and April 14th with Secretary Kerry, finance ministers from all continents, technology leaders, to kind of drive home the point that we need a call to action, and that finance ministers and the investment community need to be taking more seriously how the internet is a key driver for growth and identify some best practices for both the multilateral development banks and also for other countries. We are at the State Department working to secure the support of other G7 countries around connectivity principles that we've kind of drafted that talk about digital literacy, that talk about cross-cutting impacts, that talk about dig once policies. And so we're trying to use all the different venues with the G7, the G20, the IGF, the OECD, to really kind of build support for this international initiative. And then we'll continue implementation. And the idea is we'll have this event in the spring, Bank Fund, and then working with IEEE, the World Bank, we'll continue to have these types of discussions at all the Bank Fund meetings up until 2020 to continue driving support toward this connectivity agenda. And the next slide kind of gives you a sense of the April 14th high-level event at the World Bank Executive Boardroom with President Jim Kim, co-hosted by the World Bank and the State Department, inviting finance ministers from all continents. We're getting a very strong international reaction to this, which is really positive. One of the things that finance ministers are saying is, I think you sent us this invitation by mistake. I think you meant it to send to my communications colleague or my ICT colleague or my regulator colleague. But no, the point is that we're trying to disrupt the thinking that they don't need to worry about, that they need to be thinking about this, right, as a key priority for their key priority for their country. And so the notional schedule to our meeting is, of course, we're going to be telling them why does this matter, why the internet should matter to them. We're going to be asking people to kind of come with commitments, whether it's a country or a stakeholder. And so one of the commitments that we're exploring with one organization is to actually help us track progress towards how many people are coming online on a monthly basis. And we're talking to kind of organizations like the International Telecom Union, which actually get the data from governments, but there's really no active monitoring of progress here. So it's hard to even know, are you actually making progress, or what is actually being done for 1.5 billion by 2020? And then where are we going for here? Again, we'll set out some best practices for MDBs, for governments, and do a call to action roadmap from now until the October Bank Fund, the fall Bank Fund meeting, and identify all of the events from civil society, the technical community, and elsewhere where we can kind of really accelerate progress towards our goals. The next slide just shows you, since our launch in September, how many governments have now come on board to support the Global Connect initiative. Over 37 countries, a number of industry partners, really excited about the civil society, global NGOs that are coming on board, 26. Again, this is a very new initiative. Both Suhas and myself have only been working on it since September. And in that short amount of time, it's really built a lot of support from other sovereign countries, industry members, and NGOs, because I think it's really resonating that there's a need to now really redouble efforts on international connectivity, and that the U.S. can play a role, an important role, in U.S. companies and the U.S. civil society community. What we're telling folks in the short term, diplomatically, is that we want as many finance ministers as we can from invited countries to attend the April 14th high-level event. Many of those finance ministers are either the countries that have already expressed support or other democratic countries that we really want to try to encourage to attend. We want them to endorse the initiative, the connectivity principles. We're seeking country commitments that we can highlight in our outcome documents, whether it's development assistance, pledges, innovative kind of approaches to tracking and monitoring progress, or data, or commitment to like doing studies about the connection between connectivity and GDP growth, or just helping us with some data research. And then, for us, we really want to get a clear emphasis that connectivity is cross-cutting development priority, and for all of the governments that are attending, that they should also kind of champion our cause and encourage other governments to also prioritize digital connectivity in their development plans. One of the things that I'll just note is, so I've just done the high-level event on the 14th, this 2-hour thing. We're also doing a very innovative thing on April 13th, is we'll have a full-day Global Connect stakeholder session that everybody would be invited to if they're interested in attending. And we're basically trying to bring together the technical community, ICT ministers, regulators, at an all-day session to kind of really explore technical solutions for regulators and kind of discuss their local challenges and how we can help them by listening, right, to what are some of the problems that they're facing and some of the hurdles, and kind of then bringing to bear the technical community's expertise and willingness to help solve those challenges. So with that, I hope that provided a good overview, and we can always take questions.
Structures. You're talking about water, energy, and things of that nature. And what we're looking to do is sort of bring in, if you will, the expertise of professionals, technical people who are working in those spaces. I sit in the IEEE primarily in their standards division, so I'm very familiar with consensus building and working on technical procedures, if you will. And it's interesting, even in that sphere, if you will, you see the differences between people who are working in technical aspects and developing technologies in the power and energy sector versus the ITC sector. And sometimes it's almost like they speak a different language. They think differently. There's different processes. They have different knowledge sets. So it's, in a way, what we're trying to also accomplish, to Manu's point about trying to raise awareness not only among the finance ministers, as you mentioned, they're getting this invitation. They're saying, wait a minute, this must be an error. It's really to kind of change a little bit of a mindset around that and to try to connect people that traditionally aren't, necessarily maybe thinking of it as a top priority or sort of on top of their work agenda, better way of saying it, but also to, sort of bring down those barriers and start having more open conversations. I think over the last 10 years in particular, with the internet governance space in general and the connectivity challenges that we have at our feet right now, a tremendous amount of work has been done over the years, and various communities practice and communities coming together, civil society, technical, government, NGO. But sometimes I think what happened is they went sort of deep into their sector, if you will. And I think we're at this really critical turning point and a juncture that it's time to kind of come back up with all that expertise and that knowledge that has been built over the years of trying to address these challenges and sort of bring it back up to the surface and have a different type of exchange of information. So with that, the IEEE, as many you may or may not know, is a pretty large technical organization. We have about 460,000 members in 160 countries around the world. And what's interesting about it and makes it a little bit unique is that we have the foundation of the organization is sort of this 40 plus technical societies. So we're in power and energy, computer, communications, aerospace, vehicular, and all have pretty deep verticals, if you will, into that. But when you look at the connectivity challenges and how we're trying to use different types of infrastructure and innovative solutions, and how we need to bring that expertise, that deep expertise that sits in those different industry domains or sectors, to connect that type of knowledge and to cross-pollinate that. So maybe different sectors can learn from each other, and then we can bring that information into the nations that are having challenges, and that we can sort of helping educate and building that capacity to that second point. That it's a very different thing, how people define things and how people approach challenges and problems. I don't think it's meant intentionally, but people get into their ways of doing things. And I think it's critical that we sort of start having a different dialogue and getting on the same page about, the real challenges here and how we can bring that technical, different type of technical expertise into it. So we can look at the infrastructure. We can look at some innovative, there's amazing things going on with satellites and balloons and, even, what we're looking at, mesh, thank you. I was looking for the word. I should know that very well later too. But, it's how we can again, the theme for us at IEEE, so how we cross-pollinate and how we convene that type of expertise. And looking at it just that's just the technical side of it. But, as Manu and Carolina and Sue who have been working on this, you look at it also from there's a policy aspect, there's finance and investment aspects of this. So it's a really complicated matrix in a way, and it's not going to be easy, but I think that's where we have to roll up our sleeves. And at IEEE, we'd like to take on a challenge. So we're very supportive of the Global Connect initiative and looking to bring our technical expertise into it.
Thank you so much, Karen, and that's extremely necessary, right? And this translation is extremely necessary. But and even legacy of the technical community that in many countries was the community bringing the internet, right? Was the fathers of internet in many countries were the folks from the technical community that now are part of the IEEE. But talking about legacy, I think our panel is the first panel at RightsCon with a representative from the White House. So thank you so much for coming down to San Francisco. For this panel is a good thing. So if you can, so if you are a special assistant at the White House for the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which actually has been employing a lot of innovative people that are really worried with connectivity. So if you can bring a little bit to us the White House perspective on this and why Obama has put this on a highlight. And we see this in US with Lifeline and other programs. So if you can speak to that, would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and you mentioned, first of all, thank you all for joining us late on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate that. And thank you to Access Now for putting this entire amazing event together. Yeah, you mentioned Lifeline. A lot of our work has focused on domestic connectivity. And that the reason why is because, it's our taxpayer dollars at work. We're putting a lot of our money into our own people. But this initiative doesn't involve taxpayer money, at least new taxpayer money that we're spending. This is about taking the partners we already have and mobilizing them and directing them in a way that's productive and that'll get the most, whether it's investments, whether it's financing, whether it's just aid money. This is, I think the way we look at it is there's, you've got the technical experts over here, like Karen was saying, you've got the finance people over here, and you've got the government people over here, and they kind of speak publicly, but they never actually sit down at a table and talk to each other and talk about what's the issue here? Why can't I, the technical expert, just bring up a map and draw out where the fiber needs to go, or like where, what I need to do to get last mile, or why the regulatory expert, can't say, well, here's why you can't do that, but here's how we could work together on this. That sometimes that conversation happens, but then maybe the person who has the money like is out of that conversation, right? So why don't we just get everyone together, right? Why don't we just start this community practice? Why don't we start having some more situational awareness, and why don't we start having these conversations? Because the government, isn't going to be the answer to this. What the White House, what the State Department wants to do here is get the right people at the table. And so that's why we need all of you. It's not going to be us that solves this problem. It's not going to be us that brings the next 1.5 billion people online. It's all of you, and it's all the experts, and it's all the people who care about this issue. Clearly, you guys care about this issue because you're here right now. So let's hear your ideas. This was our idea. We want to take. We spend a lot of money both financing. We have the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which finances projects abroad. We have USAID, which does a lot of development and disaster relief. But what we've been doing is going to those organizations and partnering with them, working with them to see what opportunities there are to integrate connectivity into the work they're already doing. And we've found that there are a ton of opportunities. And at this April 14th conference, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation is going to announce 2 or 3 really major financing projects that's going to bring, more than 10 million people online. And that was sort of what we're getting at, and that's sort of where we want to go with this. So that's sort of where we're coming from.
Thank you so much. And if I can provide quickly civil society perspective here, one thing that is important that I've been noticing since public knowledge has been involved in this work is emptiness of civil society paying attention to the multilateral banks. And it's very interesting to see that, because the gender movement is there, the environment movement is there, but we are not there yet, and we should be there. Because sitting and digging with those guys at the World Bank, and I'm from Brazil originally, so I went to look at the IDB, the Latin America Development Bank, and it's our countries do look up for these banks, because at the end of the day, they are putting millions of grants and loans to developing countries to develop a series of projects. And we have to ensure that when the grants are made, there is a series of incentives that all the considerations we consider here in the RightsCon, privacy by design, human rights, et cetera, are also taking into consideration these grants when we are also telling them, set down a fiber optic cable to connect the next billion. So it's really interesting for us to start digging in these new organizations and not, I know we are few and we have very few resources, and we are already overwhelmed with UN and trade agreements and all the other venues we follow. But at the end of the day, sometimes where the money, the power, where is the money is the power, and the banks do have that power to shape policies and best practices through policy papers, but also through the grants and loans. So I'm just clarifying this and asking more attention from civil society of what the banks are doing and get involved with that. The banks already have civil society committees and liaisons, so just get involved with that. And with that, I actually would like to open up for questions and a conversation. So if you guys have anything to add, and if you guys have anything to comment, please feel free. It's really a conversation now.
Thank you. Okay, no problem. Hi, my name is Chinaiche, and I'm from Research ICT Africa based in Cape Town. My question is with regards to the perception you receive when, as an American organization, funding these projects, because following on from what you were saying, where civil society has to play a role in ensuring what exactly banks are doing, but what is the perception that you receive? Some countries welcome American aid coming into their systems, but what about other countries that are quite reluctant? for example, I come from Zimbabwe, and we all know my dear president is not super keen about America coming in, more in love with China. So what problems do you face, and what are the solutions that you have?
One of the reasons why we made this a multilateral effort was because to answer that very question. We don't want this to be a U.S. initiative at all. We want this to be, we want as many countries as possible joining us. We wanted to get the conversation started, but right now we have, I think, 37 countries on right now. Yeah, and you see all those groups, but if it were up to us, it'd be 150. That's sort of, there is going to be that perception initially, but I hope that after these next couple of events and after a series of conversations that we're going to get started, and after new heroes come up, yes, we want people within all these governments to come out and say, this is something, not just global just connectivity, this is something we want to support and prioritize. Then hopefully we can get more countries on board, and hopefully we can take the U.S. Global Collect Initiative, the U.S. out of that line.
Yeah, and just also adding to that in terms of clarification, the funding that comes, there was a World Bank representative here in the past session, but, and Manu, you correct me, but the fund that comes from World Bank and the various regional banks do not come from US. It might come from US, but come from Germany and from other banks and from other countries, and then they pull the money and distribute under certain strategies. So even this call where I made get involved, if you get involved, you can maybe shape that strategy where the money is gonna go to. So in that sense, that's why it's so important to have these multilateral banks, because they receive and they give money broadly. Comments or questions?
Force the question by Chennai. I think we have the rail gang. Oh, yes, Mayland Fang, the people-centered internet. I'm originally from Singapore. I live here for the last 30 years. I think we face a new era of potential digital colonialism. And that's actually what's underlying all of this whole fight. Finance is just a disguise for that. I think I'm very, very curious about the Global Connect initiative, how we can take into account the actual people and their own voices, and not just what we think they should have or do, or the kinds of opportunities we think they should have. So I invite you to respond.
I think one of the most exciting parts of what we're seeing is that stakeholders, IEEE, the World Bank, are coming together to put a day-long conference together on their own to help bring in these voices and to help shape the initiative and to hear from local regulators from across the world, whether it's India, Brazil, Mexico, all of them are invited. And so this is, a stakeholder-driven effort to help support the Secretary of State, who will have a high-level event the next day with the various finance ministers. And for a lot of us here, that has to be really inspiring. It is for me when I see that we basically have a number of kind of cross-industry, international people coming to Washington to kind of engage in a multi-stakeholder discussion that's very inclusive, to kind of talk not only very new, right? This is all kind of a new organic thing that is kind of just happening on its own. But I think for us, we're excited to play a role and excited to support. And what Malin is saying is absolutely critical, that we are very responsive to other voices and other ideas, and really also talking about inclusion and the benefits of connectivity and local challenges, which I think is going to be critical for the success of this initiative and other initiatives like it.
Yeah, if I could just add, I totally agree. I think, getting the local community and the regional perspectives and challenges and sort of a bottom-up approach to that is really critical. And, that's where organizations like IEEE kind of come in a way. Being a global organization with a very deep and broad geographic reach, we have many, many technical chapters, if you will, all around the world. And, the concept, if we, take it a little bit further, if you look at it sort of one of the terms that we've kind of thrown around a little bit is sort of a connectivity core. Think of a Peace Corps, but a connectivity core. And how we can sort of leverage organizations like IEEE and others. There are many others out there like us that we can, get and utilize those local communities to hear the challenges firsthand, work with the local communities, and really have boots on the ground, if you will, in those parts of the world, so that we get that and it sort of comes up bottom up. And we're also, looking at it as a global issue, but also with a regional perspective and a local perspective.
Thank you. My name is Leah Simeher, and I am with the San Francisco Bay Area Internet Society chapter. I also work for Internet Systems Consortium. It's a well-known company that has been around for many years doing good work, developers of Bind, DNS, so very involved with the infrastructure of the internet. So for the Internet Society chapter, it's exactly what you were just responding to in terms of a bottom-up and really trying to, again, you mentioned the word civil, involving the community to be aware and educate them, inform them, and make them participants to understand really how the internet is structured, the policies that are implemented, how they're implemented, and how those can directly affect their lives. Many people are so removed from that, so we try to do that again at the bottoms up. We are the boots on the ground, so to speak. But my question is, how far, when you're talking about stakeholders, the ones you've mentioned so far are organizations and all that. How does it percolate when you talk about bottom up? How does it percolate up from the people's views, interests, and all that? Also, because I am actually volunteering for the Internet Society, I've seen how challenging it is when you don't have resources to help you get that working. So how do you do that?
I'm glad you, actually it's a very positive relationship, a great partnership with ISOC. And for those, I'm sure everyone really knows who ISOC is. But, there are many good programs there with education. And actually, we have partnered with ISOC on what they call wireless for communities aspect. And it's more on a capacity building side so that we can educate local communities on, there's many solutions or potential solutions and options for connectivity, to say the least. This is sort of more on the wireless side of it. But, it's sort of, you start with those types of partnerships and working in, communities, and hopefully, you can scale out that knowledge and you can scale out that information and what you're building and bring it into different communities. By all means, it's a huge challenge. But it's sort of, one success story at a time, one, community at a time. And again, taking those lessons learned and being able to take what works and apply that in different regions of the world if it does, or, also learn what didn't work and learn from those lessons. But I think it is more on a sort of a local level and sort of bringing those types of programs into those local communities. But it is going to require resources. It is going to require partnerships and education and capacity building. And that's why I think this initiative is so critical, so that we can start raising the awareness about those challenges among investors and technologists and technical communities. And as I mentioned earlier, sort of like everything that we've learned over the past so many years is sort of, let's bubble that up, take the best, and see what works in different regions of the world. I mean, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, to say the least. There's many, many challenges, different policies, different cultures. It's all contextual. But, the best thing is we can get the best practices out of that and build those communities of practice. And it is, we're excited about being involved in this, but we know that we're standing sort of at a little bit of the foot of Mount Everest in a way. But it is sort of working in that local capacity, so it's sort of getting the support and the drive from organizations that can help, support that from resources, but also then working with local communities and organizations like ISOC to, bring that kind of training into the local communities and knowledge, if you will.
And just a quick testimony to that. I think that the folks that, you know, when you have the dominoes in sequences and started, so while we have some heroes in the US government that did start that domino effect, we are all pieces of that. And I think we all should be pieces of that. And why I'm saying that's because every time I call Manuel, I give suggestions, they listen, and if it's possible, they implement, or they say, why don't you do that? So that's what I'm bringing here, because at the end of the day, we come from a variety of communities, right? So I also do open education. The open educational community, we bring a lot of anecdotes, we do challenges in communities, and you bring that inspiration from bottom up, and then you bring demonstrations of what happened and what worked on the floor. So if anybody here has ideas, and I'm thinking about open innovation and platforms for challenges and things like that. Let's sum that let's plug those things to the Global Connect, because the possibility is open. No, I heard Novelli saying that herself. So any idea to plug into this and collect this grassroots initiatives is really important, because just by doing that, we're gonna learn the best practice from the ground. Any other comment or question? Gary?
Hi, I'm Gary Garriott from Internews. I find this session, super interesting, partly because I think there's been a narrative out there for many years that we don't really have to worry about connectivity because, there's millions and now billions of mobile phones out there, and it'll sort of take care of itself. And the graphs that you were showing that the digital divide is not closing sort of belies that narrative, I think. But as Karen was speaking and talking about the different pillars that the IEEE works with, including power engineering, it made me recall at least a couple of years ago when I was looking at pictures from space of the Earth at night. And, Africa has few lights, parts of Asia and certainly Latin America. My guess is that it probably coincides even today pretty much with the lack of connectivity. So I'm wondering, maybe from the IEEE's point of view, or any of you, if you could care to comment, the specific role that providing better and more reliable and affordable electrical power might have to promote this whole idea of global connectivity.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely one aspect, a very critical aspect of this, because we can have, we can put towers, we can put solutions, devices, which, people will definitely reap the benefits from. But if they don't have the power, that's a big challenge. I know there's a lot of work going on with smart grid or smarter grid or intelligent grid, in where part of the world you live and how they refer to that. Smart cities, which is a little bit broader than that, maybe a more advanced from an ICT type of perspective. But the power piece of it is really critical. And actually, we are starting to bring in that and talk about connecting, no pun intended, different types of communities, is to bring the power sectors in, and the people who are working in power generation, transmission, working in smart grid, to see, what we can do and how that will help enable connectivity. It's been there, sort of underlying all of this, but now it's time to bring that to the forefront and part of this conversation, and to get those power engineers and utilities into the mix of this conversation. I think it's really critical.
Sure. And Natalia, if you want to also bring a little bit your experience on IDB and broadband before you join American University, would be great to hear a little bit the investments of that bank. I know you cannot speak for them, but anyway.
So one more question. This is Leah again with the Internet Society chapter, San Francisco Bay Area and Internet Systems Consortium. The question I have is, are there any local projects that are being done, maybe, because there are some connectivity issues too in the US. Are there any incubator projects happening locally with this initiative to maybe act as a good example or something like that?
my colleagues probably can speak more to it. It was interesting. A couple weeks ago, I was at South by Southwest. I don't know if people are familiar with that big conference, right? Yeah, great. In Austin, it's a great city. And I did follow more of what they call their government policy track this time. Coming from IEEE, we usually sort of really focus more on the whole MTech kind of scene, all new technologies. But it was interesting because I did attend a panel to your point about some examples of, it was more on the broadband focus, what might be going on in some particular cities. So we had Santa Monica, which has an interesting model, Kansas City, which is working with Google Fiber. But there was, and pardon me for not remembering her name at this moment, but there was someone from New York City. And you would think, New York City, why would they have connectivity problems? It's New York City. It's like one of the major cities of the world. But when you think about the concrete and the infrastructure and the old infrastructure, it really is a challenge for them. And then they have some communities still after so many years of the impact of Superstorm Sandy, and knowing what happened not only from a power perspective, but power goes down, connectivity goes down. Literally, and I live on the East Coast, so I know 9 days of no electricity after that storm, living in New Jersey. But it was really just, I think it was an eye-opening experience for many city planners in addressing these types of issues. So one that really kind of caught my attention was what was going on, what they're trying to kick off in New York to address some of those challenges. They have massive amount of concrete. They have high buildings, signals get blocked, and then they have areas that were, under sea level that during a bad storm are just totally taken out. So I think, although in a developed part of the world, in a very major city of the world, there are lessons I think that they're doing there that can be applied maybe to some other regions of the world. So, I think the more we can learn about those types of pilots and projects and initiatives, not only in North America and around the world, the better that will be. And that's, I think, one of our key kind of objectives, along with all of this, is let's sort of find out what's kind of going on there so that we, around the world, in those type of pilots and examples and initiatives, and what they're really learning, it was that best practices thing that we can apply. But like I said, for me, it was just sort of eye-opening. You never really thought of New York City having a connectivity problem, And I think that's another part of this awareness that we need to have and what we can learn from that.
And I just want to add to that, I think that's one of the biggest flags at the work for public knowledge nationally. I lead the international part, but public knowledge actually core work is exactly to support infrastructure and access. And we do a lot of work with African American communities and rural communities. The pockets in US are surprising to me, even coming from Brazil. And I think we have to commemorate that yesterday, the FCC actually voted to adopt the order that for the first time allows low-income subscribers to use the Lifeline subsidy to help them connect. So even if there is infrastructure, sometimes they still cannot connect, right? So I think it's a great step in the connectivity direction. And maybe with that, there might be more market incentives and state incentives for the expansion of infrastructure. So Matthew from CDT, Center for Democracy and Technology.
Yeah, thanks, Carolina. Matthew Shears, Center for Democracy and Technology Society. Great initiative, fully support its intent. A couple of comments, though, and I think you may be being let down by your slideshow. So if you've already addressed these concerns, don't hesitate to tell me. So one of your slides has 4 boxes on it, and it talks about various digital ambitions that you have here, this one here. So this is great, okay? But the World Bank just came out with a report called Digital Dividends, where it says that the digital dividend has to be supplemented by the analog complement, which is good governance, skills development, and good regulation and competition. I'm not seeing that analog complement here, and I think that's a very important thing to encompass in your presentation. I'm sure you've thought about it as a part of the project, but it certainly should be there. To the point that was raised earlier on, one of the things that's clear when you look at this presentation is that there's no reference to multi-stakeholderism. There's no reference to local community. There's no reference to what you need to be doing on the ground in developing countries to make this happen. And I think that's should be a core part of this initiative, and it needs to be reflected in that presentation, and it needs to be talked up, because right now it's not coming across. And I think there are a couple of other things that really need to be addressed here. I mean, when the Secretary of State is meeting with the finance ministers, is this new money
Is this old money? Is this redirected money? What exactly is coming out of this initiative, and what's the goal from the kind of support and investment perspective? So I think there are some key questions here that aren't answered. I'm sure you have the answers, but they're certainly not answered in your presentation. I think it would be good to get more clarity on that. Thanks.
I think they're excellent questions. We are pleased to tell you that the World Bank is launching a digital development partnership to respond to the challenges of the World Development Report that will help countries with those analog complements. And it's really exciting to see this multi-country program that is focused on capacity building and policy development. And it'll be a major subject for the meeting with Secretary Kerry and the other finance ministers, where they're going to be announcing a number of corporate sponsors for the Digital Development Partnership, as well as country sponsors. And it's helping to really kind of show the bank's leadership in trying to also drive progress towards giving countries help with those analog complements. Matthew is right about the importance of multi-stakeholder participation. And I think for us, it's really heartwarming to see the April 13th Global Connect Stakeholders event, which, you know, governments are attending to kind of listen to stakeholders and also share information, whether it's the technical community, the industry, the NGOs. Everyone will kind of be represented and participating actively, including ISOC will be there because, of course, they have done amazing work in local communities. And we are trying to bring together a number of people from different places, and people are traveling from all over the world for the event, so we can really hear and kind of think creatively together about really how to mobilize support for the initiative. I may have missed one of Matthew's questions, and if I did, I will now ask Suhas or Karen to kind of kindly take the mic because they're also very familiar with kind of the initiative and its goals and stuff.
I thought you covered it all. I don't, was there another?
No, I think actually just to help Manu, the memory here, we also have the Alliance for Affordable Internet involved on this, and they have been doing great work on this analog piece. So we hope to bring everybody with its own expertise and some efforts. And the hope is that actually we set a series of progress checkers, and those questions need to be part of those progress checkers. So join them.
If I may, I think the issue of how is this going to be implemented and what are the resources that are going to be brought to bear at the local level is the essential dimension that's missing here. And how are those forces marshaled? Which resources are going to be called upon? How are we going to take into account the actual demand and needs on the ground in the countries that where this project's going to roll out? Thanks.
So in the U.S., you know, we are, and we've had a number of meetings with our U.S. development agencies, U.S. financing agencies, and we're talking about how the internet is just as important as traditional infrastructure, and they should be prioritizing programs and projects and funding and financing. And so to that regard, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation has already announced a $250 million loan for Myanmar for 2,500 satellite towers that will really boost connectivity in one of the countries that's really fallen the most behind. The Overseas Private Investment Corporation is also, and will be, as was alluded by my U.S. government colleague, another major announcement of $170 million in financing for another country, that being India. So this is new financing money that's really going to make a difference in connecting millions of households. And we hope that it's a model for other donor countries that are also partners with us in the Global Connect initiative, whether it's the UK's DFID or CETA or other kind of Germany, and we're hoping to catalyze more donor money and attention behind this so we can help as many people get connected as possible.
I just want to be sure, give to Natalia, but actually we have to then end. There is another session, but okay, Natalia, and then quickly.
Just to reply to your request, through my experience at the World Bank and NDB, I could feel that, well, development banks are a development agency and a bank at the same time. So actually that's an advantage, but also a challenge in the sense that, you know, in the end of the day, they want to have they want to foster development, but in the end of the day, they need to have project and loan. So what actually I saw from the projects I worked is that whenever in broadband, yeah, whenever, yeah, whenever it's aligned to the country's policy, that actually makes a huge difference, because if you try to create something new, that's much harder. But when you already have like some sort of structure and the country is already looking for the type of things you can provide, that actually makes it much easier.
Hi, I'm Wala Kasmi from Tunisia. I have an NGO called Youth Decides, and we work to use technology to solve society problems. So I have two questions. The first one, did we think about the outreach of like people? If we are talking about connectivity, if everyone gets connected to internet, you know that internet can be used for the good and it can be used for the bad too. You know, in the MENA region, ISIS is using this tool to recruit young people. Can we think about projects to fill this space called internet, this space called the information technology for the good, and support like NGOs who work on that? My second question is, how can we express our support to this initiative? How can we exactly do as government or civil society? Thank you.
Well, you can express your support by signing up, by contacting us, by giving us your ideas, by joining us in all the conversations that we want to begin. There is a website.
I can tweet on the website. And actually, this event is our outreach event, for example. Okay, there it is. Is it there? Yeah. Share.america.gov Global Connect.
And I think, we absolutely, the initiative is literally, I think, 7-8 months old. There are a lot of questions that we have to think deeply about, like the one that you raised, about how we can encourage through this initiative the good. We don't have all of the answers for these types of difficult questions. We do think that connectivity is a key driver of economic growth, can help with like youth unemployment, can really kind of provide a lot of stability in certain countries that are struggling, where you do see like ISIS and other types of activities, right? And so clearly there's the benefit of connectivity in this, but you are raising good questions that can only be answered with dialogue and really kind of hard thinking. And so this is why we're excited about the 13th meeting. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue these dialogues, not only on the 13th, but at the Internet Governance Forum, at a lot of different forums, so we can really try to accelerate progress towards providing answers to some of your questions.
Perfect, and I'm tweeting all the links, and there is more material and stuff. So first, thank you so much, all the panelists. Thank you so much, all of you that have joined us on a Friday afternoon. I know we are all exhausted. I asked Brett that we should have shiatsu massage chairs for the next RightsCon. So we all relax a little bit during sessions, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon and the final closing session. Thank you so much.